Hi, everyone. Welcome to Policy Palooza. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Abby Cohen, and I am the Manager of Partner Engagement here at DCPS. We're so glad to have so many folks attending, and I know others will be joining. We're glad to see you all here. Before I dive in, I want to lead with my with a little call out that we always start our Policy Paloozas with, which is that this presentation has a lot of information, but that is really intentional because we want you to have a comprehensive resource that you can refer back to as needed throughout the school year. So we thank you in advance for your attention, and really please don't hesitate to put any questions that you have in the Q&A box. Anything that we're unable to answer today, we will definitely follow up with. Our session is being recorded and closed captions are available if you need them. If you'd like to access closed captioning, you go to select more on the top toolbox, settings, then accessibility, and then you can toggle on the captions option. We will also circulate the recording and PowerPoint deck after today's training. So our agenda for today is pretty straightforward. We are going to cover some of our objectives for the conversation, review our partnerships team, requirements for school program providers, review some of the some policy updates and reminders that we have, and then also highlight our partnerships database and a few resources we want to make sure you are aware of. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, great. I'm not able to see the slides advancing, so just please flag. I think they are moving forward for everyone else, but please just put a comment in the Q&A box if you are not able to see the slides. So today's objectives, we are going to be providing an overview of the processes and procedures for school program providers. You know, as I said, there's a lot of information on the slide deck, so we really hope that you'll use this presentation as a resource in the year ahead. We won't go through every slide word for word, but we have lots of links to references in the deck as needed, and you can, of course, always reach out to us with any questions. So in today's session, we are going to discuss how DCPS works with school partners, again, review those requirements for school program providers, and then review system resources and save some time for questions in the end. Okay, here we go. Looks like the slides are moving forward. Great. Okay. So next on our agenda is to review the structure of the partnerships team. So together, Katie and I make up the partnerships team. We are the partnerships and donations team. We also process all donations that come to DCPS. So appreciate those of you who have gone through that process. Our team is led by Sarah Parker, our Officer of Engagement and Partnerships. And as a reminder for any new partners who are joining us today, our team sits within the Office of the Chief of Staff, which is led by Maggie Gurley. So our office has 4 core beliefs that really underpin our approach to family, partner, and community engagement. So our team, the partnerships team, really focuses on the 2 that we have highlighted in yellow. The DCPS community extends beyond our school walls, and that DCPS cannot do this work in isolation. Today's conversation is really focused on policies and compliance requirements, but Katie and I both want to make sure that we are conveying our real deep gratitude for the work that you all do and the opportunities that you bring to our schools and students. So often we hear from families and teachers and students that it's these additional opportunities that they have at school that really help them feel connected to their school community, and it helps them feel excited and engaged in their learning. And we are just really grateful for everything that you do for our communities, and really do thank you for that. So with that, I will turn it over to Katie, who is going to dive into our next section about our school program provider requirements.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I am Katie. I'm the coordinator for partnerships and donations with DCPS. So as the DCPS partnerships team, we work primarily with a subset of partners that we call school program providers. These are organizations that provide their own programming to DCPS students, work with students 3 or more times per school year, and are not health or mental health providers. These health or mental health providers must go through a separate vetting process with our mental health and health services team. So examples of school program providers include tutoring programs, mentoring programs, dance class providers, aftercare providers, and other enrichment providers. Some examples of what would not be considered a school program provider are field trip opportunities, volunteer groups, dental health providers, and curriculum vendors. So because our school program providers work so closely with DCPS, there are a number of policies and procedures that they must follow to protect our students and the district. This is an overview of all the requirements for school program providers, which we will be reviewing in more depth in the coming slides. And we rely on our schools and our providers to ensure that all of these steps are complete before your programming begins. So we know this is a lot of information. It's a lot of information for us too. So we've created a number of resources for you to help navigate this process that you can find on our website. So if you go to dcpspartnerships.com, you can find our partnerships preparedness checklist and our Where Do I Start quiz to help you navigate the process. So our very first step in becoming a school program provider is to register in our partnerships database. This registration will allow your organization to share information with schools about what they offer in our database, while also confirming that you are aware of our policies and procedures before moving forward with working with DCPS. Additionally, this is how we collect contact information for our partners to communicate key updates from our office via our newsletter and regular email communication. The registration in our database, we ask that partners confirm this annually to ensure that all your information is up to date. This is a process that typically occurs during the summer, and when it is time to do that, we will notify the contacts that are included on the database. So now time for a pop quiz. Make sure that you're all with us here today. So since the chat is alive, you can go ahead and drop your answers in here. So true or false, an organization providing health or mental health services is considered a school program provider. See a lot of false. Great. Yes, that is true. This is false. These organizations would not be considered school program providers and should go through the separate process with our school mental health and health services teams. So after registering in the database, maybe the most important step is to partner with a school or central services team. So if you haven't already identified a school or central services team to partner with, here are some tips that you can look into to forge that connection. So the first is to reach out to a school that's in your neighborhood. We strongly believe that the best connections are made with a school when you can show your connection to the community that you're in. Another way you can connect with a school is by emailing principals and schools with whom you're interested in partnering to discuss your program and its benefits to students. You can also reach out to us to see if there are any specific needs that your programming may address, or you can connect to relevant central services teams to demonstrate how your programming is aligned with DCPS strategic priorities. So for more information on this, on our website, dcpspartnerships.com/partner, you can see information on our schools, how to contact schools, and also central services teams. So our third step in the process, which is also the longest step in the process, is obtaining a formal agreement with DCPS. So in addition to registering in the database, all school program providers must have an official agreement with DC Public Schools. This agreement can either be a memorandum of agreement if you are not charging DCPS directly, or a purchase order if you are charging directly. Just one note here under the memorandum of agreement section, if you are charging an external group like a parent-teacher organization or another group, or charging families directly, you will also require an MOA. These memorandums of agreement are typically good for 5 years unless stated otherwise. For contracts and purchase orders, these are typically managed directly by the school and issued by the Central Services Office of Contracts and Acquisitions, and they expire at the end of each fiscal year, which for DCPS is September 30th. An important note, school principals are not allowed to sign agreements with school program providers. These must be signed by the DCPS chancellor or the contracting officer, depending on whether it's an MOA or a purchase order. In some cases, schools can sign what we call partner acknowledgement forms that do not include any legal language and outline logistical items and general roles and expectations. And if you have any questions about this type of documentation, you can share it with us for review by our general counsel. So how do you check if you have a valid agreement on file? For school program providers who are not charging DCPS directly and thus would require an MOA, you can go to our DCPS partnerships database to see whether you have an MOA on file and its expiration date. And if you'd like a copy of your MOA, you can always contact our team. On the database, there is a button to do so. And if you are a paid program provider, you can check the DC vendor portal or contact the DCPS Office of Contracts and Acquisitions directly. So this slide is to show our MOA timeline. I'm not going to go into this process in too much detail, but this is just to mainly show that this process can take quite a bit of time. So therefore, we really encourage you to begin this process as soon as possible when you need to either request a new memorandum of agreement or renew your existing one. We estimate that it takes about 90 days. However, we often see it take more. So the earlier you can start, the better. So one of the reasons why this process takes so long is because of the memorandum of agreement insurance review process. This can be one of the most time-consuming parts of the process if you've been through it. I'm sure you can attest to this. So you can see here that there are many steps that organizations must go through, that we go through with coordination with different DC government agencies, primarily the DC Office of Risk Management, when checking your insurance requirements. So in order to prevent delays in this process and unnecessary back and forth, we ask that you please work closely with your insurance brokers to ensure that you are submitting all requested information for review to the DC Office of Risk Management. For Learn24 grantees, to help expedite this process, when you request your memorandum of agreement with DCPS, we ask that you please also share your current COI and any email confirmation from Learn24 of the insurance compliance. So as shown in the previous slide, insurance requirements are determined by the DC Office of Risk Management based on the details of your programming. Although those requirements may vary, all school program providers should expect to see the following requirements. That's commercial general liability insurance, auto insurance, sexual abuse and molestation insurance, cyber liability insurance, and umbrella or excess liability insurance. Any insurance negotiations will need to be done through the DC Office of Risk Management, which we can help to coordinate that communication. And DC ORM nor DC Public Schools are able to recommend insurance providers. So another pop quiz, you can drop this in the chat again. The principal at the school in which I'm providing programming should sign my DCPS MOA. True or false? False. Yes, that's correct. You all are great students. So yes, principals cannot sign MOAs. They must be signed by the chancellor, or if you have a purchase order, they should be issued by the contracting officer. So I'm going to turn this over to Abby now to talk about the fourth step in this process, which is DCPS clearances.
Thanks, Katie. So the fourth and very important step is to make sure that all of your staff and volunteers have completed the DCPS clearance process. This is a requirement for anyone working with our students, whether it is in person or virtually, and no other clearance from another agency will be accepted by DCPS. It does have to be our process. So once an individual is successfully cleared, they'll receive a DCPS clearance letter, which we recommend you keep. They should definitely keep for their records, and then you should also ask for a copy so that should we need to ask for verification, you're able to provide that. And DCPS clearances are valid for 2 years. So there's two sort of buckets of clearances that are most common for our partner organizations to be dealing with. One is for contractors or providers. And so you are considered a contract or program provider if you're an individual who is being paid for the services that you are providing to DCPS. So any of your staff members that you are paying for their service to DCPS would apply for a contract or a program provider clearance. There's 3 steps outlined here. They'll submit their DCPS clearance application, complete their fingerprinting appointment through field print, and then they'll complete a mandatory drug and alcohol test screening. The second bucket is for volunteers. You might remember that there used to be 2 different volunteer categories. Those have been combined into one, which is great, makes things much more straightforward. And that's really a 2-step process. Volunteers will complete their DCPS clearance application, and then they'll also complete their fingerprinting. Sometimes in both the contractor and the volunteer application, there's a screening included in the DCPS application around tuberculosis exposures. And so some individuals may be asked to also provide evidence of a negative TB test, but they will be made aware if that's required. Here is a quick overview of the different requirements and how they vary between contractors, program providers versus volunteers. You'll see they're very, very similar now. The real distinction is with that drug test, which is only required for contractors / program providers. And again, those are individuals who are being paid either by DCPS or the partner organization themselves for their services to DCPS. I see a question in the chat about one-pager or flyers. All of this information is listed out step by step on our partnerships website. So we have that link included in the deck. So really recommend that you head there. It really has all the links and really helps walk folks through in a step-by-step way. So a few tips and tricks that we've learned over the years for successfully completing this process. Before reaching out to verify the status of a clearance application, we would ask that you confirm with your staff member or volunteers that they have successfully submitted their DCPS application, because if they haven't done that yet, we will have no record of them. Please make sure that you have a process in place for tracking your staff and volunteer clearances. We need to really make sure that anybody coming into our buildings or working with our students virtually or in person have a valid DCPS clearance on file, and that folks are aware of when they will need to renew. Again, clearances are good for 2 years. When folks are applying through the DCPS application, we do recommend that that they list a contact for the organization they're applying under as their secondary point of contact in their DCPS clearance application. That way, if there's any questions, both the applicant and then the sort of organization they're working with, we know how to contact them. And then lastly, if you do reach out to the DCPS clearance team for a status update, please include the individual's full name and either the last 4 digits of their social security number or their birthday. This helps make sure that the clearance team is looking into the correct individual. So I see a couple comments about the process and some of the time that it takes. I know we will have time at the end to go over questions, but I want to say that this process has been improved significantly, I would say, in the last year and a half. You might remember that there used to be a step that involved the Child Protective Registry that was eliminated, and so that saves quite a bit of time in terms of how quickly these get processed. Most typically, the thing that draws the process out is individuals not following up on the next steps, especially that drug test piece and the link that folks get to schedule their drug test appointment, will expire. And so I would just really encourage you to share the resources that we have here today with your staff and volunteers so that they are really clear on each individual step they need to take, because obviously the quicker that they complete what they have to do, the faster their clearance can be processed. So with that, I will turn it back over to Katie.
Great, thanks. Yeah, and as Abby mentioned, we will have some time at the end for questions as well. But to go on to step 5 of this process, to enter into a facilities use agreement with DGS or the Department of General Services if you are operating outside of regular school hours. So if you're operating outside of the building, if you're operating in the building outside of regular school hours, and for the Department of General Services, regular school hours is defined as instructional hours for the school, then you must work with the school and the realty office to submit your application to use the facilities at the school. These applications must be signed by the principal and emailed to realty.applications@dc.gov. When you do so, DGS will ask for your certificate of insurance with DC government listed as the insured. And depending on several factors, you might be charged fees for rent, security, and/or custodial overtime. If you fall under these 2 buckets below in the bullets, you should not be charged for security. That includes if you are a free school program provider in good standing, and if you operate in one of the 55 schools that offers DCPS sponsored after school programming and your program ends by 6 p.m. We're going to go through this bottom note later on in the slide about summer programming, but that application date has been confirmed for May 3rd. So the last step here is obtaining an annual donation agreement if you're providing free programming to DC Public Schools. Now, this is a relatively simple and quick process to go through if you're providing free services, which is outlined here. And you can find more information at dcpspartnerships.com/donations. This is a process that's dictated by the mayor's office. And even though it is a requirement, it is also helpful for us to demonstrate to DCPS leadership and DCPS community the extraordinary value that you are all bringing to our schools. Last pop quiz of the day. If you have a clearance from DCHR, you do not need to complete the DCPS clearance process. True or false? Yes, everyone is correct. I think we addressed this earlier in the chat as well. DCHR clearances would not be accepted. You also need to complete the DCPS clearance process. Great, everyone has an A+ for today. Great job. So someone asked before if there was an overview of all of these requirements. I definitely recommend going to our website, but you can also screenshot this page. This shows all of the steps that you'll be required to complete, when it's required, how often the renewal is, and resources and points of contact for each step. So you can screenshot this page now, or as we mentioned, this will be shared at a later date so you can review it then. So in addition to the requirements we just reviewed, there are some additional requirements and expectations for program providers to be mindful of. So I'm going to turn this back over to Abby for those additional reminders.
Great, thanks, Katie. So we sent this notice out in December, but we wanted to make sure that we cover this during today's training. If you as a program provider are employing a DCPS paraprofessional, so someone who is employed by DCPS as a paraprofessional, you cannot pay them for work done between 3:30 and 4:30 p.m. There was a new collective bargaining agreement that was put into place that's effective October 18th. And so we just want to make sure everyone is very aware of this. Paraprofessionals can still support support partner programming during that time, but the duties must align with what is outlined in their DCPS paraprofessional position description. And again, you cannot be paying them for services or for work that happens between the hour of 3:30 and 4:30. So we do strongly recommend a review of salaries and hours for any impacted individuals to make sure appropriate staffing levels and support for continuity of operations. If you have questions about this, then I would definitely reach out to the POC at your school, and then of course our team if they're not able to help. A quick reminder about mandated reporter training. Anyone who works directly with students is classified as a mandated reporter. All DCPS volunteers, employees, and contractors working with students must take the mandated reporter training. So we have linked here the training provided by the Child and Family Services Agency. You will receive a certificate upon completion. I do want to underscore that this is a really important requirement for all of our partners. And so we want to make sure that everyone understands their responsibilities, that it is not, necessarily your job to decide whether an accusation is legitimate. Any instance of suspected or alleged neglect or abuse must be reported as a mandated reporter, and you cannot get in trouble for reporting something. So our recommendation is that if you have any concerns, to report that so that the correct parties can investigate it and support students and families as needed. Along the same lines, we did want to remind folks about our incident reporting procedures. So if any incident regarding the behavior, safety, or health of any DCPS student or any provider personnel occurs during programming, there's 3 things you need to do. Please report it to your school-based point of contact. Please report it via our incident reporting form, which is linked here on this slide. And then please make sure to report it to the point of contact in your memorandum of agreement. In most cases, that's either going to be me or Katie. So please make sure that all of your program staff are aware of this protocol. It's really important that we know when things happen so that we're able to support both you and the school and make sure all the correct steps have been taken. Language access services. So we have several resources linked here to make sure that all families are able to access programming and materials in a language that they understand. DCPS is committed to serving students and families from diverse languages and backgrounds and strives to give families information in a language that they understand to ensure equitable access to programs, and any organization that is receiving district funding is required to comply with the DC Language Access Act. So we have several resources, including information on the language line available on our website, and so we definitely recommend checking that out. And a little preview. I know we've been getting lots of questions about summer building use. We are going to hold an information session specifically about summer operations next month, but wanted to share a couple pieces of information here. Any programming that happens during the summer will have to operate between June 26th and July 31st. And please note that all DCPS buildings will be closed on July 4th and July 5th without exception. Building use agreements are required for any organization that wants to use a DCPS building to operate its own programming, and those will be due to the Department of General Services by Friday, May 3rd. A quick note that if you are interested in working with DCPS to provide afternoon enrichment programming, you can reach out to our colleague Devin Smith. His email is listed there. Please note this year DCPS is not providing funding for summer enrichment programming, so this would be for any organization that has already secured funding for summer operations. All right, and last but not least, a few system and resource highlights. So a couple really great resources here, all available on our website. Katie has done an amazing job updating this tool, making sure it has all the information and some helpful resources that you all need. So please visit dcpspartnerships.com. As I mentioned earlier, it includes step-by-step instructions for everything that we've covered today. It also has resources like our School Partnerships Toolkit, which has really helpful evidence-based resources around Things like how do you norm with your school on important aspects of your partnership? How are you going to share space? What does it mean to, if you want to push into staff meetings, what is that going to look like? Lots of great resources and best practices there. We also have a new sort of like resource library for our partners. So that's where you can find links to additional trainings and other resources like the checklist that Katie highlighted. And then last but definitely not least, our school partnerships database, which is where each of you have, this is where you register, where you have your partner profile. It's where we ask you to keep us up to date on the schools that you're working with. So yeah, this is a great slide for I think a one-stop shop of most everything you might need, including recordings from our fall Lunch and Learn series. So thanks to everyone who joined. We hosted 5 different Lunch and Learns with experts from across our central services. And I thought it was a really awesome opportunity to hear directly from the folks leading a lot of really innovative and important work from across the agency. So recordings from each of the Lunch and Learns are available on our website. You can see the link there. So definitely check those out. You can see the different topics covered. I think really helpful information and a nice opportunity to better understand some of the strategic initiatives happening at DCPS. And then we also have a refreshed partnership database. So like biggest shout out to Katie, who manages our database and spent a lot of time thinking about how to update the look and feel to improve our partner and school leader experiences when they're using it. So I think the next time you log in, you will notice it feels a little less databasey and just easier to navigate and understand what information lives where. And then for anyone who is listening who hasn't yet registered, we've also launched a new pre-registration video that provides a snapshot of the content that we covered today. We really want to make sure folks understand everything that goes into becoming a DCPS partner before they start the process. So that will be launching, and we hope will help folks feel like they kind of understand what they're taking on when they begin this process. So with that, we will start our time to answer questions. I know there have been a bunch in the meeting chat. We also got a few questions in the chat. So I'm happy to start with anything that we haven't covered there. We had a few questions submitted as part of registration. One was about DCPS emergency procedures and emergency response protocols. So I wanted to share that we are working on putting together a training for partners to understand DCPS's emergency response protocol. So I'm really happy about that. I know that's a topic that's come up a lot. I'm so glad that we'll be able to provide that. Someone did ask about insurance providers, and as Katie mentioned, we're not able to suggest specific vendors. So unfortunately, we aren't able to provide any suggestions there. I've seen a couple questions on what it means to operate in multiple schools. So if you are not charging DCPS and you have a memorandum of agreement, that covers all schools that you want to work in. So once you have your MOA, you're good to work with any of the schools at DCPS. If you are being paid by a school, then you would need a purchase order or a contract with each school that you're working with. Okay, just looking at the chat here. So a couple questions about summer. I will say that we are going to do a summer specific session, so I don't want to spend too much time here, but basically the options are, if there are partners who have secured funding for providing summer programming, there is the opportunity to potentially partner with DCPS to provide afternoon enrichment as part of its K-5 summer school. Otherwise, external entities are able to rent space in DCPS schools, but there is likely, charges that go with that, especially if the school is not already set to be open. So that would be security, custodial, and potentially a rental fee. So stay tuned, more to come. We'll be sending out a communication at the end of the week with more details, as well as information on how to register for our summer specific session. Just taking a look at the chat here. For data requests, that's something that you can reach out to our team about. Typically what we'll need are Excel spreadsheet with the data elements, the students, their student ID, and the data elements that you need. And then we'll need valid FERPA forms for every student, because we do need to confirm that we have one on file for any student that we're requesting data. So feel free to reach out and we can share more information. Some questions about sharing information about the volunteer clearance process. I would direct folks to the partnerships website. We have a lot of great information there. Do you need an MOA if you are just planning to use a DC facility? No, you only need an MOA if you're actively partnering with a DCPS school. So if all you are looking to do is rent space in a building and you are not collaborating with the school in any way, they are not supporting recruitment, your program is open to any, student in the city, then you don't need a memorandum of agreement, but you would need to go through that building use or facility use agreement process through the Department of General Services to secure your space. This presentation will be shared. Both the recording and the PowerPoint deck will be sent out to everybody after we wrap up. And I see a question here about how to gain access to fields and if that's the same process as accessing buildings. It is not. There is an online field request system called RecTrack. I don't have the link on hand, but all field reservations go through RecTrack. Regarding the incident reporting form, it's mentioned that we need to report it to the school-based contact, fill out the incident reporting form, and then the point of contact in our agreement. Do we complete all three or just one of these? All three, please. We want to triangulate our information sharing. So please make sure you're doing all three of these things. As a partner, will you need a business license? For the MOA process, no, you don't need a business license. If you are going to be paid by DCPS, either a school or central services, you do need a number of things. I'm not super familiar with that process because we don't handle procurement, but you need something like, a certificate of clean hands. So there are different requirements if you're going to go through procurement. For mandated reporter, I recommend that you do it on an annual basis. We do here at Central Services all have to do it annually. It's really important to make sure everyone is has a good understanding of their responsibilities and that it's top of mind. So I would recommend making it an annual training.
If I just jump in here,
Yeah, absolutely.
there's a question here about the name of the document that can be signed while waiting for the MOA to be signed. I just want to clarify that the memorandum of agreement is necessary. That needs to be finalized before programming can begin. I think there were two documents I mentioned. One was the partner acknowledgement form. This is something that usually will come in addition to the memorandum of agreement. That's something that doesn't have any legal language and just kind of outlines general roles and expectations, logistics like timing when your programming starts, points of contact. That's something that can be signed by the school, but that is needed in addition to the MOA if you are providing that programming more than 3 or more times per school year. And then the other thing I mentioned was the donation agreement. So that's if you are providing free programming to DC public schools, you can request the donation agreement concurrently when that MOA process is going on. And I'll drop that link in the chat to how to submit your donation.
I see a question about whether or not there will be other lunch and learn opportunities. I realize I blew past that slide earlier. If there are topics that you want to hear from us about, please send us an email, put it in the chat. What are you curious about? What do you want to hear more about? We would love to do more of those or provide more of those opportunities. So yes, please let us know so that we can make sure that we are, being responsive. A separate MOA is not needed if you're doing programming in different schools. One MOA will cover your operations across schools. For the donation form, no, that is a great question. So when a partner is providing services free of charge to DCPS, it's considered an in-kind donation. So filling out the form does not require you to donate money. You're already donating, and in our eyes, you're already donating services to us. So the donation agreement is really to document the value of those services.
I see a few people have their hand raised. The microphones are disabled, so if you could drop your questions in the chat if you haven't already, that would be great. We can address it here.
One other thing I want to clarify when we think about who needs an MOA, I know we have several providers who charge families directly, and I know lots of our partners have their own registration process, and that can feel kind of independent of the school. But if the school is supporting your operations in any way, advertising on their website that you are an after-school provider, obviously helping with recruitment, that's still that would mean that you need the MOA. So just want to sort of underscore that, because I know there's lots of nuance in how organizations work with schools, and it can be a little complicated, but just want to underscore that MOA is needed. Great question. If one is listed as a partner who charges for services, what is the process for swapping over to a donation model of partnership? It would just mean that you need to get an MOA. So if you, this is not unusual for partners to have kind of different setups depending on their funding structure and the schools that they're working with. And so maybe in one case, a school is funding them directly, and then 6 months in, they get a grant, and so now they're able to provide their services free of charge. So as soon as you determine that you're going to be providing services free of charge to the school, you'd go ahead and get that MOA. Clarifying question about the paraprofessional update. So no, we are not saying that you cannot pay DCPS staff who you're working with. What we just want to clarify is that if you, actually, Katie, could we go back to that slide? If you employ specifically DCPS paraprofessionals, so individuals who are hired by DCPS to be a paraprofessional during the school day, their contract was renegotiated, and so now their tour of duty, their typical hours go until 4:30 p.m. So they can support partner programming from 3:30 to 4:30, so long as it aligns with the responsibilities in their official DCPS position description. But for that hour, that 3:30 to 4:30 hour, the partner should not be paying them. After 4:30, they can be, you can pay them, but between 3:30 and 4:30, you cannot pay them. That is considered double dipping, so to speak, and we don't want that. So we just want to make sure everyone's very aware of that change. And if you have questions, please reach out directly to your school. They are very aware of this shift, and so they'll be able to make sure that everyone's in compliance. This is specific to paraprofessionals, not all staff at the school, just paraprofessionals. I see a question about field trips. I will say that the field trip guidance for partner-led field trips is under review right now, so I don't have an update on that. But if you're working with a school, I would work with the school leader to determine the right path forward and whether or not this needs to go through the DCPS field trip protocol. If the school is organizing the field trip, then certainly yes, you do need to follow DCPS field trip policies.
And I can jump in here about the donation policy that someone asked about. So when you begin your memorandum of agreement process, you'll receive regular updates, and when the that is going through the final signature, you'll get a reminder to fill out the donation agreement request form if you are providing free services. So by free services, we mean you're not charging DCPS, you're not charging families, you're not charging some external entity for services. What would be considered a donation is, for example, if you received a grant to provide programming to students in DC and you are choosing to work with a DC public school to provide that programming, we would consider that a donation, and we would want to get that recorded in our donation, or we would want to get that recorded with the mayor's office, and that would be a case when you would need a donation agreement. That is a pretty simple process. I think I dropped the link in the chat before, but you would just need to fill out a quick form, and then we would send you a one-page donation agreement for signature. As mentioned, this would not hold up your MOA process or getting programming started, but we would want to get that recorded.
So a lot of questions about field trips. I will say we will follow up with updated field trip guidance for partner-led field trips as soon as we are able. Otherwise, if the school is organizing the field trip, then they will need to follow DCPS field trip protocols. We know this is a hot topic, so we appreciate your patience. Yes, we need an MOA for free after-school programs happening in a school. Correct. Yes. During the day, after school, anytime. Yeah, no problem. The clearance process is good for 2 years. So I would say the only time within those 2 years that someone would need to get re-cleared is if the nature of their employment changes. So if you have a volunteer who's cleared as a volunteer and then, a year into their clearance, they are hired as a full-time staff member to work with DCPS, then they would need to get re-cleared as a contractor. Volunteers supervised or unsupervised do not need the drug test. That is correct. The drug test is for contractors / program providers, and those are paid individuals who are paid for their work with DCPS. All right, any final questions? These were all great, thank you. All right, well, we can give everyone some time back in their day. Here's our contact information. Please reach out with questions. Please visit the DCPS Partnerships website. That really does have so much helpful information, but we are always here to help and answer questions. And we just thank you for your continued partnership with us, for navigating all of these policies, and we hope everyone has a great rest of the day and week.